January 6, 2007 was just another ordinary Saturday night. But for Channon, Christian, and Chris Newsom, a young couple from Knoxville, Tennessee, it was supposed to be special. 21-year-old Channon, a University of Tennessee student juggling two jobs, was planning to unwind after a long week with her boyfriend Chris, a trim carpenter by trade. They'd been together for about 3 months and were looking forward to a beautiful evening out, a party with friends, and probably create some beautiful memories together at the start of the new year. At around 9 p.m., Chris drove to Washington Ridge Apartments. Channon was at a friend's getting ready for the night. He arrived just in time, and after an intimate embrace at the parking lot, the couple prepared to head off for their planned evening out. But as they made ready to leave after sharing what would be one of their last moments together, Channon and Chris were being watched keenly by 4 strangers. Blissfully unaware of this, the young couple made an attempt to step into their car, but just at that moment, their young lives would turn into a living nightmare. Lemericus Davidson, a local drug dealer, along with his brother Letelvis Cobbins, and 2 of his friends, Eric Boyd and George Thomas, had set their sight on them, on what they felt would simply be a quick carjacking. The 4 men didn't know the couple. Channon and Chris were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, momentarily distracted in the glow of young love, blissfully unaware of the horror about to unfold. With a gun pointed at them at point-blank range, they were forced into the back seat of Shannon's Toyota 4Runner and driven to Davidson's apartment on 2316 Chipman Street, a place that would soon be etched into Knoxville's darkest memories. Davidson, along with his brother Letelvis Cobbins, George Thomas, and Eric Boyd, turned the seemingly spontaneous carjacking into something far more sinister. Inside the Chipman Street apartment, Vanessa Coleman was waiting. Once inside the house, what was supposed to be simply a carjacking quickly escalated. As the hours passed, the couple's fate would spiral into an unthinkable nightmare. It's believed the assailants were under the influence of PCP, which might explain but never excuse the depravity that followed. Channon and Chris were separated, and then the abuse began. Chris was first. He was forced upon by at least one of the men. He endured unspeakable abuse too horrific to fathom. He was anally violated with foreign objects, most likely a broken chair leg, that caused severe bruising and lacerations. This horrific abuse continued for a few hours. As the early hours of Sunday morning approached, he was forced outside, bound and led barefoot through the freezing winter night, wearing only a t-shirt and underwear. He was forced to walk through the freezing night towards nearby railroad tracks, with his mouth gagged with his own socks, and a dog leash was secured around his neck to prevent him from running away. When they reached the railroad, Chris was made to kneel down, and a belt was secured around his ankles. A sweater was then pulled over his head, and he was shot in the back of the neck. The bullet entered between the neck and the shoulder, failing to kill him. At this point, he fell forward onto his face, and they shot him again. This time, the bullet traveled upwards into his torso, severely damaging his spinal cord, but it still failed to kill him. Finally, they placed the gun against the side of his head and fired a shot into his skull above his right ear, killing him instantly. After killing him, they wrapped his body in a blanket, poured gasoline over it, and set him on fire. At around 12:30 a.m. on the morning of Sunday, Channon was forced to make a call to her father, telling him that she would be home late. Over the next couple of hours, She was forced upon, violated, choked, and stamped upon repeatedly. Her mouth, anus, and genitals were severely bruised and lacerated due to penetration by foreign objects. Due to the severity of the abuse, blood pooled in her genital area, forming a large clot. In her mouth, the frenulum connecting the lip and the gum had been torn away as her mouth was forced open. Both sides of her head had extensive hemorrhaging from where they had stamped repeatedly on her. The rest of her body was covered with multiple bruises, scratches, and carpet burns. But as the hours dragged on, her nightmare wasn't over. Her captors, desperate to erase any traces of DNA, poured bleach down her throat and over her body. They also poured it over her genitals and scrubbed the area clean in order to erase DNA evidence. They then bound her in a fetal position, tightly hogtied with her knees pressed to her chest and her head forced against her legs. They then got some cotton material and tied it between her neck and ankles, holding her tightly in this agonizing position. They placed a small white garbage bag over her head and secured it around her neck. Layer upon layer of garbage bags, totaling 5, were wrapped around her body before she was placed inside a trash can. They bundled a load of bedding sheets on top of her, and then they fixed the lid of the trash can tightly in place and left her there, where she would slowly, agonizingly suffocate. The most horrendous thing about this all was that she was still alive when she was stuffed inside the bin. She slowly died out of a combination of positional asphyxiation and confined space asphyxiation. Forensic experts estimated that it would have taken between 10 to 30 minutes for her to die. It was an unbelievably traumatic way to go. Her lifeless body was found days later, wrapped in plastic, inside a garbage bin in the abandoned house on Chapman Street. It is thought that she died sometime between Sunday evening and Monday morning, meaning that she had probably been tortured for around 24 hours before being stuffed inside the bin. Chris Newsom's body was found by a railroad worker about 11 hours after he was murdered. Semen was found in his rectum, but the heat of the fire had destroyed any DNA evidence that might have linked to the killers. Channon Christian's car was found on the Monday. Fingerprint evidence from inside the car led the police to America Stevenson's rental apartment, and a search warrant was obtained for the property. Upon gaining entrance into the house, they found the house abandoned and empty, but they spotted a 32-gallon plastic garbage can sitting in the kitchen corner. At first, they thought someone was hiding inside, and they approached cautiously with their weapons drawn out. But upon opening the lid, they found a lifeless arm sticking up out of the plastic bag, partially covered in the bedding material. The body was identified as Channon Christian. Semen was found inside Shannon's mouth, rectum, and vagina, and it was matched to Lemericus Davidson and Letelvis Corbins. The police began a manhunt for Davidson, and he was found shortly after, hiding in an abandoned building. Eric Boyd was also arrested. During questioning, Lemericus Davidson tried to pass the blame onto George Thomas and Letelvis Corbins. Soon afterwards, Thomas, Corbins, and Vanessa Coleman were arrested too. Ultimately, Lemericus Davidson was given the death sentence. He tried making an appeal in 2019 but was denied, so he's still on death row. Letelvis Corbins was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. George Thomas was given a 127-year sentence, but in 2018 he agreed to testify against Eric Boyd in return for having his sentence reduced to 50 years. There wasn't enough evidence to charge Eric Boyd with murder in the first trial, so he was sentenced to a maximum of 18 years imprisonment. After Judge Thomas testified against him in 2018, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. There was also insufficient evidence against Vanessa Coleman, although she was present in the house whilst everything was taking place, but they couldn't prove that she had taken part in the abuse or the killings. She was given a 53-year sentence, but that was later appealed and reduced to 35 years. She has been eligible for parole twice since then, but she was denied both times. All 5 perpetrators are still behind bars, and all appeals have been denied.